So traumatic brain injury, also called TBI, the Alabama Administrative Code defines traumatic brain injury as an acquired injury to the brain caused by an external physical force, resulting in total or partial functional disability or psychological impairment, or both, that adversely affects a child's educational performance. Traumatic brain injury applies to open or closed head injuries resulting in impairments in one or more areas such as cognition, language, memory, attention, reasoning, abstract thinking, judgment, problem-solving, sensory, perceptual, and motor abilities, psychosocial behavior, physical functions, informational processing, and speech. The term does not apply to brain injuries that are congenital or degenerative, meaning through genetics or any other things like that, or to brain injuries caused by birth trauma, also included with the genetics. So I have this video. This is just an overview. It is about 20 minutes long, so I'm just going to show the first part of it because it does a really good job of doing an overview of what a traumatic brain injury is, and then we'll go ahead and finish.
All right, you guys, welcome back to another lesson. This lesson here is going to be a lesson that's near and dear to my heart for a few different reasons, and that is to talk about the complex world of traumatic brain injury. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about with this topic, so make sure you guys hang in there, and I'm going to start breaking this down with an overview. All right, so let's go ahead and start off talking about traumatic brain injury, or something that we refer to as TBI. And so what this is essentially when we have some sort of external force that's going to be causing damage to the brain. And this can really be the result of many different types of forces. So things from mechanical, thermal, chemical, electrical, even radiation can technically cause damage to the brain. But more often when we're talking about this, we're referring to the physical, mechanical forces. These are going to be the most common type. And so our attention has really been brought to TBI over the last decade or so, primarily as a result of some of the sports-related injuries, most notably the big NFL controversy, as well as TBI amongst our military, given the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and seeing higher rates of TBI as a result. And so because of these, we've learned quite a lot in regards to this injury. Now, unfortunately, TBI is a very common thing. In fact, the CDC estimates that we have 2.5 million traumatic brain injuries that occur every year in the U.S. alone. And TBI is a major cause of our preventable death and disability within the United States. And in fact, it makes up over 30% of all the injury-related deaths. And really, we estimate that there's probably 50,000 plus deaths per year as a result of this, and half of those are actually dying within the initial 2 hours after the injury. All right, and so with that said, let's take a quick look at the etiology of this particular brain injury. As I said, all of this is a result of those external forces really being transferred to the brain tissue. So I'm going to take you guys back a little bit to high school physics. And if you remember, we have our equation, force equals mass times acceleration.
Okay, so really short, but I think it's super informational. Some common characteristics include headache, dizziness, disorientation, nausea, vomiting, and memory problems. There's a lot that all encompasses it, but it is a lot, obviously, very mental based and kind of in your head and your brain control your entire body. So it does affect pretty much your entire body. Some physical characteristics that you might see are problems forming speech, problems with the five senses, and that's not just taste and smell, that's sight, touch, all of those. That decreased motor skills. And some more physical characteristics that you would see would be things like seizures, uncontrollable muscle contractions, muscle spasms, and hemiplegia. Some cognitive characteristics, memory loss, short-term memory loss, long-term, the inability to focus or concentrate for long periods of time, and sometimes even short periods of time. Trouble with sequences and organization. This is things like patterns and other things like that. Some social or behavioral characteristics that you see. There are a lot of behavioral problems that we see with traumatic brain injury, specifically because in some cases, it's so hard to express what you need and to understand the complexity of emotions. And sometimes, so there's a lot of just social emotional things that go on. So this is a quick screenshot of a TBI screening. I know you can't really see it, but it's interesting on how much goes into assessing and making sure that, because TBI is such a broad scope, but at the same time it's very, very specific. This disability is usually identified and diagnosed through neurological exams. The exam usually looks at your motor and sensory function, cognitive ability, eye movement, reflexes, coordination, all those things that we know that your brain needs to be kind of on its game for. Other tests such as imaging tests like CT and MRI scans cannot detect every traumatic brain injury. It's a common misconception, just throw them through an MRI and you'll know what's going on. A lot of TBIs cannot be seen through a CT or MRI scan. Assessments that are used to determine how how severe the TBI or traumatic brain injury is, they're generally done through neuroimaging. But like I said, not all of them can be done through those scans. There's also the Glasgow Coma Scale to determine the extent of impaired consciousness. And I have a video a little bit later in this presentation that kind of talks about some more of the assessments that are used. So this is a really long quote, but I really want to read it because this is how learners with this disability receive their education, because a lot of students with TBI do alternative education or something like that. So it says each local school district must develop and use procedures to identify and evaluate children suspected of having a disability that has a negative impact on their learning and performance in the classroom, and therefore needs special education and related services. There are no required minimum evaluations to be used on the child before determining eligibility in one of the 13 qualifying disability categories, which TBI does fall under those disability categories. And the school team must also determine if the assessments are needed. So this is not just for TBI alone, this is just kind of an umbrella of everything. What are the best educational practices for the student with a disability? Like a lot of learning disabilities, the extra processing time, extra time on coursework and tests, and even just asking questions, that extra processing time, a lot of kids, they'll need a couple minutes to really process what you're asking. Encourage structure and routine with schedules and checklists. Modify assignments and break them into smaller, more manageable tasks. This definitely helps with kind of the overstimulation and just kind of getting super stressed out with the amount of work. Allow students to record lessons or have access to lecture notes. This is great because they can go back, they can pause. If they don't understand something or something happened, they can go back and they're not missing out on that time. What are the perspectives of parents and families regarding having a child with disability? Many parents at first have a hard time coping, as any parent would, and adjusting to the new normal of living with a family member who has a traumatic brain injury. For many families, it is just like the grief cycle, which we know is denial and anger and bargaining and just the grief of kind of losing out on, what could have been of that life. They have a denial and they will have that they deny that it will have a long-term impact, and they want to get back to the new normal as quick as possible. They might have sadness over the things that their child or family member will miss out on, and the relationships that will now be hard to navigate because communication is going to be an obstacle. A lot of families have a frustration with the recovery process because it takes a lot of time and dedication to take those baby steps that are needed. Traumatic brain injuries are not healed in overnight. They take time, and those baby steps are such huge milestones for some of these kids. So it's definitely a different perspective that you have to have. And then I just have a picture here. It says leading causes of traumatic brain injury. It's not just football or a huge crazy accident. It really could just be from a fall or a significant blow to the head. 47% here it says they're from falls, assault, other unknown, or struck against. So that's what we see. What trends and issues are affecting the field for this disability? There are many trends and techniques that are affecting the field of traumatic brain injury. One of the most beneficial things that we see is the use of technology and adaptive devices that really helps students. And there's also some brain kind of like stimming electrical connections that people are using right now. And there are cognitive issues that affect people with this disability. And the resources are available right now. There's a lot of resources for TBI, but they're still growing. And developing new techniques to combat the long-term effects of TBI. Therapy and rehabilitation are among the new techniques that are still growing and adapting to help people with traumatic brain injury. This is another long video. It says disorders of consciousness and cognitive recovering following TBI. This kind of goes along the lines of kind of what I said before of how your brain functions after a traumatic brain injury, because your brain's obviously trying to rebuild itself. Your cognitive level is not the same for the most part as it would have been before. And so this video kind of talks about a little bit. This is another long video, so again, I'm just going to play a little bit of it.
Hello, I'm Dr. Alan Weintraub, Medical Director of the Brain Injury Program at Craig Hospital. Rehabilitation after traumatic brain injury is a complex neurological process. It can be overwhelming to try to understand it all. The goal of this video is to provide you with the tools necessary to ask informed questions and participate in your loved one's care. After a severe brain injury, there's often a period of time when your loved one experiences either a partial or even complete disruption of consciousness. During this period of time, he or she may have lost awareness of not only themselves, but also have lost their purposeful ability to interact in meaningful ways within their environment. You may often hear clinicians use medical terms such as coma, vegetative state, the minimal conscious state, emerging consciousness, post-traumatic amnesia, or even the term post-traumatic confusion. During this video, we are going to closely examine the Rancho Los Amigos levels of cognitive functioning scale, which provides an observational and a much more descriptive way to better monitor your family members' changing condition as they progress through different levels of impaired or even emerging consciousness.
And that's an example of one of the assessments that is done with TBI, traumatic brain injury. There's a lot left in this video, and it is all super important, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to continue on. I highly request watching this video. It is very, very interesting. 10 disability-specific resources, organizations, charities, websites, service providers, etc. Here are 10 that I found that I really used to really understand. I wouldn't say I used them as references for this PowerPoint, but I kind of took a deep dive and really studied. The Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program is amazing. The Children's Rehabilitation Service TBI program is very good for getting kids and families kind of moving back into that new normal. The Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services is the same way. They help adults as well. Early intervention helps with school. The model systems is really what helps. At UAB is kind of more on the assessment side and the neurological side of the brain, I guess I should say. And yeah, that TBI state partnership grant program, that is a great source and alternative. Then I just have my references. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you.